Welcome back to Monish Show, everybody. And today I have Renaldo.
Hi. Listen, quick question. Why are you causing cock online?
Sure. Thanks, man. I'm glad that you asked me. So this is apparently a storm that I've caused by potentially saying that Afrikaners don't need refugee status in the US. Now, you see, I was just giving a personal comment, but unfortunately, a lot of people got very upset by it. So the question I've got is, what's wrong with your people?
Yeah, I'm the spokesperson for Afrikaners. In case people haven't know, I'm definitely not. Otherwise, I'll get cancelled. Yeah, look, I watched the video and it's just like such a storm in a teacup. You are entitled to your opinion. I think obviously people have taken things way out of context. And ultimately, you know, I get both sides of the coin, if you will. I get Chris's point of view, and I do get your point of view as well. The best example of this is, I think everybody is getting a little bit of edgy because of the uncertainty. The important thing that people need to realize is that at the moment, we don't know what the eligibility criteria is. We don't know. So anybody that is saying, oh, you need this, it's good to like kind of know, because there's people that's gone through the experience. Now, the other question is, are they telling the truth or are they lying? Were they told to not tell anybody and they just trying to get some information out? We don't know. But from just a point of view, I mean, I'm not currently interested in going because I want to fight for South Africa. And even that will annoy some people and saying, oh, you stupid Renaldo. And it's like, respect my opinion, respect my decision rather, and I respect yours. I mean, if you want to go to the United States, by all means, I won't be the person that say, no, you mustn't go, you must stay. I respect your decision to go just as much as I respect people's decision to stay. And like I said, it's getting edgy now because, you know, the weird thing is, you experienced it. As soon as you build a following of people that listen to what you say, there's a bunch of people from different backgrounds. And I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here, but it's just what pops into my head. I did a funny thing last night on my stream. I just said, you know, how many people like a little outline on my YouTube video that changes colors? And half of them liked it and the other half didn't. Now, if that already divides your own, you know, channel and the viewers on such a simple topic, imagine like what you've gone through, knowing, you know, like something like that, how that is going to cause a separation of opinion between people.
So look, I got to look at this from a number of ways. I'm going to try to be as objective as possible. The first is, if I turn around and I say that the ANC is puss, as an example, everybody cheers it and goes, yeah. But if an ANC guy comes on there and goes, no, we aren't, you can't speak for us, everybody's going to shut him down and say, yeah, but you are. So you can't take, if we're going to start off with the principle of, you're going to applaud me when I say something you like, then also understand if I say something that you like, someone else might not. And in that context, everybody would say to the ANC guy, yeah, but listen to what he's got to say and then make your decision. And so I would ask you in the same guys, try and listen to what I've got to say on this topic. And I'm not talking for Afrikaners. Everybody's like, oh, Byron's saying that Trump mustn't give to us. I'm not Trump's spokesperson. I can say what I want. She's going to ignore me to Kingdom Come and back. My point of this is that on the whole, if you discuss it with most people, and we went to a few talks about this last week and we heard what people had to say. If you talk to a lot of people about this, the majority of the reason that people want to go are economic. That's the problem, right? So the first issue is, if your rationality for going is economic, refugee status is not the route for you. Refugee status is, according to the official definition, fear of persecution. You have to need to flee the country you're in because of persecution based on a characteristic, whether it be race, religion, sex, whatever else, or membership of a group. The majority of people aren't fleeing for their personal safety. Now, that's not for me to say that there aren't individuals to which the refugee status would apply. A good example is Twattabas.
Yeah.
And said this in a video. So
Mm.
Twitter boss obviously has been doxxed. He's been threatened. He's had to close his business and move around because of the doxing of him. Refugee status.
Yeah, that's a good example. I think I know where the misunderstanding is coming in, because you are looking at it specifically from the crossing the T's and dotting the I's and on what they're saying, what qualifies as refugee status. Now, we know Trump has said some things on that executive order that is kind of all over the show. So I think what a lot of South Africans, and I don't want to speak on behalf of you, but a lot of white South Africans specifically are thinking is that, is it just like broadly Julius Malema singing about kill the boer that means that you can go? Or does it need to be something that's focused on an individual? Like, you can prove that your life, you as Byron, is in danger. So, I mean, the example is, let's say there's 1,000 people outside of the Pretoria office waiting to have the interview. Now, is the interviewer going to sit there, and when you say, why would you want to leave the country? And it's like, no, I fear for my life. And then you go, okay, why? And it's like, no, because Julius Malema saying kill the boer. The question is, will that in its own be a reason enough to give you refugee status? And we don't know at the moment. We don't know.
And I'm glad that you use that as an example, because based on what we've heard when we've been to some of the talks and people talk about it, we say to them, why do you want to go? And we had that at one of the talks we were at. And the individual turned around and said, yeah, okay, but I can't get a job here. The government is CAC racist, and I'm struggling to go from one paycheck to another. Well, I'm sorry, but that's economic migration. That's not refugee status. And the point that I made is, the reason I say that Afrikaners in that specific category, and I'm not going to, I want to come back to this in a second. I can't say Afrikaners as a whole. I should say white people as a general. The reason that they can't just say, well, we need refugee status for that, is because, as I said, people have been immigrating out this country for some time. If you have a reason to economically migrate, lots of people then said to me, yeah, but you're a millionaire and you can go live wherever you want and what. But the reality is, if you're going to go somewhere for economic factors, then usually you can get into a lot of countries on the most spurious reasons. Australia will take you, Canada will take you, New Zealand will take you, but you could have a skill and something to offer. That's your reason for economic migration. If you're a person with no qualifications, no experience, no nothing, and you want to go to, say, America's crazy expensive. Like, life is expensive there. You're going to go into a first world economy with nothing behind you in order to compete for a position. The Trump administration, regardless of how crazy or moronic they might be at points, they're not just going to take a person there that's going to have some form of economic drain. There's got to be a legitimate human rights reason, and that's most likely going to be persecution. And if you read the State Department's definition of the whole idea behind refugee status, there needs to be persecution. Now, that persecution, you very rightly say, is that based on a blanket statement that was one time made by Julius? Don't know. I don't know what the criteria is going to be. But if we base it on some of the other war zones and people that have got it, let's use the example. I don't know if you know this, but in Zimbabwe, they were offered refugee status. But the people that actually qualified for it were literally people that had their farms taken. The majority of people didn't qualify.
Yeah, so two things on what you said. We need to find out if it's whether like Twitter boss who's been doxxed, or if it's somebody that found a fence to kill the boer, kill the farmer online and heard the lyrics, like whether, like let's use Kleinfontein. So Kleinfontein, every resident there after the EFF march might be eligible.
100%.
Or then is it Kleinfontein because they sang directly at them? Or like I'm saying, is it you watched the video on YouTube of Julius Malema in a different province singing it? Like, we don't know. We don't know. But also added to that, to what you said, discrimination, if it's based on discrimination, then I think there's a case for every white South African, because you just need to reference the 142 race-based laws. I understand where you're coming from in talking about, is it fear for your life? Or is it discrimination? Because I know Donald Trump spoke about, how white people are being treated.
Well, that was a statement that he made, and it is something that he alluded to in the executive order. But a lot of people, when they want to promote their view on this, what they'll say is, "What the executive order said X, Y, Z." The executive order was an order to create a framework. The executive order was not refugee status in itself. It was an order to create a framework for refugee status. And you then want us to apply the whole floodgates argument. The floodgates argument is you wouldn't want to have the criteria so loose that you just uplift all 4 million white South Africans and they go there. But I'm sure you'll understand, and people will say, "Yep, but there's no criteria," because I heard from my auntie's uncle that criteria doesn't exist. Well, for one, are we in agreement that this applies to Afrikaners? What's an Afrikaner?
What's an Afrikaner? Somebody that's got heritage from Europe that settled here many hundreds of years ago.
So you've already established a criteria. The second is, we say that these are Afrikaners, and he even says he cites expropriation without compensation or race-based laws. Can I go there just because I feel like I want to go to the Grand Canyon? Is that refugee status? Because if you say no, it's because you're going there because of persecution. That's a criteria. So everybody naturally understands criteria has to be applied. There needs to be some vetting.
Well, they themselves said that they're going to come out with the criteria. But the problem is, between when the executive order was announced and where we are now, it's still nothing. And South Africans are very impatient.
Agreed.
Very impatient.
And this is another comment that I made, and I've made it even in some of the commentary. You got to understand that there are certain countries out in the world that have refugee programs. And some of those guys, when they have their refugee applications assessed, some of them take between 10 and 12 years. Some of them are really cack long.
Well, besides that, I mean, I think that this order wants to put white South Africans to jump the queue, because I think there's about a couple of million, like 6 million.
That's been said as an allegation, but there's no ways that will happen. It will be a violation of US.
But that's the point that I'm leading to. And listen, I'm not trying to talk negatively about this. I'm just trying to get perspective, because we have to understand that we don't really know a lot at the moment. I know that there's phenomenal resources that can tell you how the processes have worked in the past, and maybe that is a good plan to go from, is to see what previously happened. But right now, nobody knows what the criteria is. Nobody knows.
And at the end of the day, I myself have to then look at that. Like I said, as a lawyer, any framework or law that gets put in place will have to have one criteria. There'll have to be some form of vetting. There'll have to be rules attached to it. They're not just going to be able to take any old guy that walks up to them and go, I'm a white South African. I know I don't look white. I'm an Afrikaner. Ek kan 'n klein bietjie Afrikaans praat. And that's all you can say. You learned that in your script. Is that enough? Well, dude, they're not just going to take your word for it. I mean, they understand full well that there's a number of individuals that will seek economic migration to a first world economy. This is hardly their first time dealing with economic migration and refugee statuses. They've dealt with refugees all over the world. They know how this goes.
This is actually, I think that the people interested in the refugee program shouldn't make the same mistake that mainstream media has made by bringing it down to such a narrow point. Like mainstream media blamed AfriForum and Solidariteit and even Twatterbaas, saying that he's influencing how Donald Trump is thinking. And we know they don't, because Donald Trump and everybody there has got the CIA, the NSA, all of these bodies that have investigated. We saw that report that came out, or you did a video, I think, today on it, as to who's been called out.
Report, the Bilateral Review Act.
Yeah. So you mentioned all of those things. I think that we just need to also understand, as the mainstream media tried to create a narrative, we must just also watch out for not anybody in particular, but just Afrikaners creating a narrative saying that, oh, everybody will be accepted, because we don't know. We don't know. And I know that there are people that's got great intentions out there that really want to help, and that's fine, and of course provide that source. But as of now, what is today's date, the 6th of May, as we're recording this video, we don't know what the criteria is. And that is like, so for those of you that don't know, last night on my live stream, a lot of people asked me for my opinion between, I think it was you and Chris that had this discussion.
Yeah, and the comment I made was like an off-the-cuff comment, and it was basically to say, people have been leaving the country for a long time. You got to understand that refugee status typically is granted to countries that have no possibility of leaving, right? You're going to look at your places like, I don't know, Somalia. Who's doing economic migration from Somalia based on expertise? Like no one.
Yeah.
So you end up having to offer a humanitarian leave and aid and extension to help people. South Africa doesn't have that. We've had a mass amount of economic migration for some years based on skills. I understand not everybody has the means or the qualifications and so forth, but that in itself should actually alert people to a risk in itself. And that is, if you don't have those skills, those economic means, there's a reason you can't have economic migration without it. And that is because if you go to a country without it, you're going to struggle. That country is usually expensive. Their cost of living's higher. Your wages are going to be cuck low. And at the end of the day, those countries don't want to have to just give you handouts for free.
But let me push back a little bit here. I hear what you're saying, and I agree. Like, the cost of living in the United States is insane. If you got a million rand or 2 million rand house over here, you're going to live in a little shoebox in the United States. What I want to say is, I think that where I disagree with you, but once again, we don't know. So I disagree with you without knowing. As an Afrikaner, and now everybody's Afrikaner suddenly, but as a professional Afrikaner, what I can tell you is, if discrimination is in the criteria, but as you stated, it technically shouldn't be based on previous refugee programs, right?
No, it's the State Department's definition of a refugee. It must be persecution. Fear, reasonable fear of persecution.
Okay. But I'm now going on the assumption based on the executive order, and it could be factually wrong. And I think this is where a lot of people misunderstand you in that discussion, is that if being discriminated against also falls for some way or other in that bracket, then I understand if people want to leave because maybe that child couldn't go to university because they were discriminated against, and therefore 5 or 10 years later.
But is that persecution?
But yes, but that's my point that I'm leading to, and I think that's where the confusion sets in, is I think people see this refugee program to include people that were discriminated against, if that makes sense. So when they heard what you said, in their head, they went, oh, but like, I'm being discriminated against and I can't get a job, and I'm living in fear for my life because of 84 murders a day and Julius Malema saying kill the boer, kill the farmer. When in actual fact, we don't know the criteria of whether discrimination is part of it. Because if discrimination is part of it, which technically it shouldn't, based on what you said.
Well, it never has been before.
Exactly. But if it is, then I completely understand any Afrikaner that wants to leave. But the question then is, do you think that you'll be able to live better there? Now, that's open for discussion. I know that America's got a 4%, 5% unemployment rate.
Well, official unemployment rate. But as you know, even in South Africa, like, rates aren't always the reality, right?
Look, I think for somebody that has given up hope in South Africa, based on the fact that they're white and every day they're discriminated against, I can understand why they would want to leave. But
so can I.
No. But the question is whether or not the eligibility of it will, allow that to take place. But that's what we don't know.
And that's what I'm trying to say. And I'm glad you used the example of the average individual that's given up hope. Because if your entire mode of being, your shining beacon in the horizon is refugee status, and it's nothing more than just economically, I'm struggling. It's not the right approach.
I hear you.
I don't think it's a good thing to go to that individual and say, your chances of a better life is refugee status to the US. That's not going to help you. If you are the guy, as you say, the guy like Twatterbus, or how many of the farm murders where the guy gets absolutely slaughtered and half his family killed in the farmers? That's refugee status, dude. Right? You've gone and you've been shot up because you're I don't know, snitching on the government, and now they want to shoot you. That's refugee status.
Yeah.
You got fired from your job because last night you slept on duty, and now you got fired from a job, and tomorrow morning you're applying for a new one, and they go, sorry, we don't have any vacancies because they're all BE vacancies. That's not refugee status.
Yeah. However, we don't know. It's not refugee status according to what's on the website. So you are looking at it from a very narrow, and rightfully so, very narrow definition based on the history of the refugee program
Well,
and
I'm
what
a
the
lawyer.
State Department
That's
said.
how we would do it.
No, for sure, for sure.
You
And
know?
I think the problem is that because of Donald Trump and because of a lot of people broadening all of this, and I think because Donald Trump mentioned Afrikaners, and then it went over into, you know, white people. And then I think even then they mentioned discriminated against. I think that's where the confusion come in.
But you see, Donald Trump didn't actually put that into the executive order. It was something that he said when he gave his verbal commentary. What he actually said is he said that white people are being persecuted because of things such as Land Expropriation Act. Okay. And yes, he does acknowledge that there is things like race-based legislation. He understands that. Now, we also need to be a little bit careful what we mean by race-based legislation too, because yes, there are these 142 rules, but let's be honest, the majority of them are BE-based legislation. That is the reality.
Yeah, true, but
they're transformation legislation.
Yeah, true, but that still doesn't take away that it is a race-based law.
100%, but one also has to remind ourselves that the US has these too. And so if
DEI, well, they're killing them out.
They might be killing them out. And I've made videos on that, on why Trump may be targeting our BE programs on the basis of not liking the whole DEI, critical race theory type agenda, if you want. But at the end of the day, if what you're effectively saying is that I'm going to go there because they don't have these and I'm going to highlight them as being my reason for going in, you can't go to the US and say, well, I don't like BE legislation, so let me in. They're going to be like, but we got it too. So how are we any better off than you are?
I think that's important because the only way that we'll know is once somebody that has now been moved. I don't know if somebody has been on a plane and is over there, but once they are there to explain what allowed them entry, or what allowed them to qualify. Because at the moment, like I said, nobody knows what the criteria
100%.
is. If the criteria is discrimination, then hey, I think every white South African can rightfully claim a refugee status and the broader definition. And I mean, personally, I think there's three like non-negotiables for people that want to leave. And that is if you really want a better life and you fear for your life in South Africa, if you have a family and you want your children to have a better life, and then if you are a young professional that can't find a job in this country because of the color of your skin, those three is, I mean, I'm sure there could be more, but those three cover most of what I believe. But now the question comes in, does discrimination based on your race classify in the sense of not being able to get a job? And we don't know, but we're repeating the same thing over and over.
We are, and that's exactly why I keep saying that no matter how much we sit here and dissect it, I can do it from a lawyer's perspective, I can do it from a humanitarian perspective, I can do it from an Afrikaners perspective. I understand all the arguments. We don't know because there is no framework in place. But one just has to apply a little bit of logic. As I said, a little bit of logic will show you there's going to be criteria on eligibility. The question is, how narrow is that criteria? Now, in the use of your three scenarios, I think you're 100% correct. I think that's usually why a lot of people want to immigrate. How many of those are refugee status, though? Because the last two you mentioned, I want my kids to have a better life, and I want a better life. That's not refugee status. That's economic migration. And we have that already.
And also people, depending on the criteria, you can't go, there's 84 murders a day in this country because that affects everybody.
That affects everyone, yeah.
You know, and I don't want to start with the farmer. Yes, farmers is real, and yes, it's targeted, not going down that path. All I'm saying is everybody is affected by 84 murders a day. Like, I don't know if I leave your place right now, there might be a guy that is trying to rob somebody and they might point a gun at me and shoot me. That's just the luck of the draw in South Africa.
And there's a point that you said there that I think is also really important to understand, because this is a refugee program aimed at Afrikaners. But if you turn around and you say there's BE legislation there and it impacts me, what about the colored guy? Kind of people that get impacted by it too. What about the Indian guy? Because they're also impacted. So why aren't they being allowed if it's based purely on economic exclusion or BEE type program?
But you see, that is exactly it. Like initially, Afrikaners, then it broadened to white people. And then it broadened even more from what I've seen to minorities. Now, the question is, what's next? Like, we don't know.
100%.
We don't know. So to those that's upset with him, don't be. To those that's upset with Chris, I don't know, I think that's in the vast minority. Don't be upset. He's just giving his opinion from an honest point of view. I don't think you care if people leave. If they want to leave, they
No,
can
if they
leave.
want to leave, they must leave.
I think you
Absolutely.
just argued it from a point of view of what the State Department says, what has happened in the past, and what you think might be the way forward.
But that's all we can do. We can only speculate at this point in time until they finalize the program.
It's like, I speculate you're a doers. Is that accurate then?
Yeah, why not? You know, but at the end of the day, it's just speculation, right?
Yeah.
And
Why it's more, with your case, it's far. I know for a fact.
yeah, I mean, lots of people have said that obviously on the streams. I mean, like I said, it was a off the cuff comment to Chris. There was two friends having a conversation. I will say Chris has been incredibly pro the whole immigration thing based on the refugee status, and his approach at points has been that it will apply to far more people than I logically think that it would. But I look at it not just from I'm talking about it on everybody's best wishes. I understand. There's whole Afrikaans communities that may go, I want to go, it's my best bet for a future life, what. And if it applies to you and they make it that loose, congratulations, have a nice life. And I hope it works out for you. But I also have to look at it from a lawyer's perspective, and I have to say, well, I think that logically the criteria is going to be a lot lower. I think it's going to be a lot more constrained, because when you actually start going into it and you start asking the lawyer thing of, yeah, but this, like you said, if it includes BE legislation, why is it only applying to Afrikaners? Indians and colors are impacted by that legislation too. If it's, well, you know, I just fear because Julia's saying there. Okay, well, that applies to everyone. That could also equally apply even to some black people who are scared that violence occurs in the country, and it pulls them into it. Can they apply? Because that maybe they're white adjacent supporters. Why can't they go? So I think once you take those into account, I think the criteria is going to be based on you were doxxed in the media and you have had this. Your farm was burnt down. This happened to you, and you can give those accolades.
Because that's also the thing. There's two programs. There's the refugee status, and then there's the farmers. For the Americans want farmers, and those two programs. So it's also confusing for a lot of people that don't really know. But what I will say on Chris has been kind of pushed into this position of having to give information. I know he initially started giving updates, but then people just started hammering him. And poor Chris, the guy is so thoughtful of having to explain the same thing over and over and over again. And the same with Afrikaners to an extent, where they have made a lot of information available. And to their credit, also on their website, they say that we are waiting for the eligibility criteria. I think what needs to happen is everybody just needs to take a deep breath and wait for more information to come out, because in South Africa, a scammer is always just around the corner.
100%.
So I think, you know, in the greater scheme of things, I'm happy that Chris Wyatt is the one that's doing this, because I respect Chris, and I understand, and you respect Chris too. And I know that Chris is just trying to do what's best. Does that mean that he might get it wrong sometimes? We don't know, because we don't know what the criteria is, you know. You can, after the fact, say, yeah, told you so. But we don't know as of the 6th of May, 2025. And that's why I'm happy that Afrikaners and Chris Wyatt is the ones that's giving the information, because I don't personally trust anybody else.
Yeah, and you know, you also have to kind of think to yourself, right, let's use an example of what logically a refugee program could have looked like. And a good example of that might be somewhere like, I don't know, Sierra Leone. If you're being persecuted, why don't you run into the country next door? That's usually how it occurs. Right? There's very few Afrikaners in that perspective. This is how refugee programs usually work. You need to flee. You're having this persecution, right? If you moved from Gauteng to the Western Cape, does that count? If you move from your farm to your aunt's house, does that count? You're going to ask all these logical questions. I'm asking them, the Americans are asking them. You can't just rock up en masse and go, right, I'm Afrikaner because I told you to. Julia sang a naughty song. Let us go. And you see, there have been points that I think some of the information have come out have been that loose, and people have got really excited by it.
That's the thing. I mean, we don't know. And I truly hope that it doesn't get to the point where it's only 5 or 10,000 people. I hope that anybody that wants to leave for a better life, whether that's also a loose definition of what a better life is, that they can leave.
Is that economic migration or refugee status?
Yeah. But you see, that's where you got in the cuck. You're getting way too technical. Afrikaners, like, we just want to hear what we want to hear. But what I'm joking, by the way. What I want to say...
Cancel him, not me.
It's a joke. Hey, ex-Afrikaans, ek kan nie grap maak. It's like the saying, if you take 2 Afrikaners and you put them in a room alone, in an hour, they will come out, there'll be 3 new religions or 3 different branches of the same religion and 4 political parties. Argue with me on that fact. I dare you. Argue with me on that.
Well, they say this about rabbis too. They say 2 rabbis, 3 opinions. I don't know how you get 3 opinions with 2 guys.
Well, the Jewish perspective and the Afrikaans perspective. So at the end of the day, we need to just wait and see. Once again, I think it's the 7th time we've mentioned it. But I think that people overreacted to what you had to say. And I think there's a lot of people that obviously also, when I say a lot, let me bring it back. I think there are people out there that clearly don't like you, that like Chris Wyatt. Just like there are people that like you and despise me, like that you'll see in the comments below. I'm sure, go and read the comments. I see you. Yeah, comment below. I see that you posted that. But my point is, there are people that like my style that might not like your style, likes Chris's style, doesn't like me, Can we just put all this shit behind us and focus on the important thing? Let's not do the typical thing of starting to fight amongst each other. We are all well-intended. Morning Shot, Byron has got a brilliant program in how he analyzes the news of the day. Chris has got his American perspective that gives us another dynamic, and I just like personalize the news and try and give my and tell my perspective of what it is. Like, let's not fight amongst each other and start creating enemies. It's not worth it. We're all here fighting for the same thing, which is a better South Africa. So to those that want to leave and to those that stay, the people that stay might want to fight to make this country worthwhile to return back to one day.
Absolutely. And, Chris has been a lot more pro this thing being a bit looser and it being a good opportunity for people. I suppose all I'm trying to do is put a counterbalance on that and just maybe throw a little bit of cold water on there and just say, look, I doubt it's going to be as loose as people wanted. It might be a little bit looser than I'm saying it is. Okay. If it is how I'm saying, it is going to be 5 to 10,000 people. And the moral of the story of what I'm really trying to get at is, if this is your get out of jail free card on a better life, I don't think you should be putting all your eggs in this basket and putting your life on hold for a refugee status.
Yeah, I mean, don't sell your stuff right now, like don't sell your car, your house, and your dogs.
And again, we went to a talk where people were talking like that. I'm, getting rid of my stuff and downsizing and I'm doing this and it's like, I don't think that that's a very good approach right now.
As of the 6th of May. I've learned my lesson, because you need to put dates constantly in the video so people know when it was recorded. Look, the other thing is also, I think that you're right on the State Department's definition and how they're going to implement it. However, the thing that we haven't considered here is the Trump effect. We don't know, because Trump does, there's this way of doing things, and then Trump does it his own way.
Absolutely.
So the question, I'm assuming that a lot of people are looking at this refugee status and listen to what Trump has said and has just gone that way. But remember, Trump doesn't have the ultimate say, because as we've seen, there are judges, and whether we can argue whether the judges were right or wrong, but they could easily, they could open this and then a court or the Dems can go and open a case and say, listen, the South Africans or the white South Africans, this definition doesn't apply to everybody. Like there could be a court case that could come up. I'm just not saying
or they could say, or give them priority, and some human rights campaign comes out and says, yeah, but what about all the Somalis that have been waiting for 10 years?
That's something that should happen with the UN.
Right.
And it could be South Africa that does it, like the ANC government.
There's loads of scenarios on that perspective. But if I look at it from a purely political point of view, and a lot of people misunderstand this, Africa is strategically important to the United States within the next 10 to 15 years. And a lot of people don't understand why. And that is because 50% of the world's population within the next 15 to 20 years will live in Africa. So at the moment, a lot of what's occurring between the Trump administration is basically a flex on Africa to say, fall in line or look at the chaos that we can cause. But the question should become, do they want to cause that chaos in the moment? And at the moment, lots of people will speculate and say, yes, because of colonial reasons or what. I don't think Trump does. I don't think Trump wants to alienate the United States from Africa. I think that he's done the whole diplomatic point where he's had those nice conversations that didn't go anywhere. And so now he's like a parent threatening a hiding. But is he actually going to give the hiding? I don't know. Neither do you. None of us know.
None of us know. And I think that's where we can end it. It's just that as it stands right now, we don't know what the eligibility criteria is. And I think I kind of know that this stems from you listening to what people had to say at that meet and greet. And, you know, I know that you are concerned because you just don't want people to sell their stuff and open themselves up to heartache. That's pretty much what it is. So people are giving you a hard time for caring, actually.
Yeah.
So you should care less. Should care less about the people.
So you're telling me that I mustn't care about Afrikaners?
Oh, you see now he's putting words in my mouth. Cancel Morning Shot, everybody. No, but seriously,
if that's the case, Afrikaners about to get put in my office.
Sorry, I'll leave now. No, but listen, let's all take a deep breath. Don't hate on Byron. And I mean, the hate hasn't been that much. Let's be real. I mean,
no, it's very much from individuals that, and I hate to say it, see this refugee program as the answer to their life's problems. And that actually almost to a degree is exactly why I'm saying what I'm saying. I think you need to be very careful if your entire mode of how I'm going to sort my life is this program. I'm not sure that this is the program for you.
And just to clarify, it's not that you don't wish it for them. You wish
by
that
all means.
but you're just saying, be cautious.
Absolutely.
That's it.
And I think that's a responsible thing to do.
Yeah. And I fully agree with you.
Yep.
So what's all the cock about, guys? Seriously. Be sure to subscribe to Renaldo Gouws' YouTube channel.
How about dissubscribe from him and join Monish Show? I know you're already on Monish Show. But
exactly. So in that case, now let's cancel him, everybody. How dare you talk about that to Afrikaners? Yay, as I